confused, everyone.
Let's get dangerous.
This is so cool.
I know.
It feels so right.
Jake silly.
I'm sorry, who is this?
Nice try, Moonman. Pretending not to know. Earth's greatest mastermind.
You just made the list.
I thought you said that was a myth.
Just because it's a myth doesn't mean it's not true.
If you all blindly follow my plan, we may have a chance.
Sure, we talk about it all the time.
Really?
No, burn.
Game on, you Ducks. It's time for the last run through of the positions for notes on wide receivers, and this is going to be a tough one. Let's see if we can do 10 minutes. I don't know if it's possible. Maybe I should stop babbling. Jake, shut up and get going. Although that just took more time. Jake, shut up. Just let's go. All right, Ja'Marr Chase, number one. What do we need to talk about there? CeeDee Lamb, Justin Jefferson. And then the next tier has Amon-Ra St. Brown, Puka Nacua, Drake London, Nico Collins, Brian Thomas Jr., Malik Neighbors. You can nitpick. You can hate me for having Neighbors at that bottom end of the tier, but just with the nagging injuries, they're not severe, but they just keep popping up. And the quarterback situation, yes, Jackson Darts looked great in the preseason, but that's preseason and also context of some of the defense he's faced. It's just the risk being more than Amon-Ra St. Brown, which might not be a player who can reach the number one position like Neighbors can, but by far the safest of all safe wide receivers that aren't named Chase, Lamb, and Jefferson. Nakua's injuries, you can put into the Neighbors conversation if you want, but Matthew Stafford being back, no pun intended, it makes me feel better about that situation. Any given day of the week, could feel great about any of them. Drake London could be top 3. Nico Collins could be top 3 if everything hits right for them. Let's talk next here. Jackson Smith-Njigba starts it off. Stop wasting time, Jake. Jackson Smith-Njigba starts it off, and I think that Kubiak's going to do a real nice job with the scheme that we saw from past years. I mean, hell, he had Shaheed and Olave running free last season with the Saints. So to see that with the Seahawks, with Sam Darnold, and I know a lot of people, basically everyone, expects Darnold to take a step back after last year, but I think Smith-Njigba and Kupp, well, we'll talk about Kupp later, but I think Smith-Njigba can benefit from Kubiak. Tyreek Hill, if healthy, could get back inside the top 5. Devontae Adams wouldn't shock me if he outscored Puka Nacua, especially because of the touchdowns. A.J. Brown, a little bit lower than most, just getting frustrated with his continuing injuries year after year. But T. Higgins starts off the first of the number 2 wide receivers on the team. He's T. Higgins. He puts up wide receiver 1 numbers because it's Joe Burrow and the Bengals. Ladd McConkey, big fan of him. You guys know that from last year, but I think he's getting a little overrated, especially with the addition of Keenan Allen. I just think this offense is going to be run balanced, not run heavy, and I don't see a ceiling for McConkey to reach the top 5. Whatever, it's nitpicking. Terry McLaurin, assuming he gets signed, DK Metcalf is going to see a ton of volume as the number 1 for the Steelers. Mike Evans, the leader for the Buccaneers. That's easy. Calvin Ridley, my favorite, underrated wide receiver this year. 120 targets last year, and he still was a top 30 wide receiver with junk throwing them the ball. As in 4 red zone targets and 1 end zone target for the entire season. If Cam Ward is anything we hope he can be. Hey, look, go back to Terry McLaurin. Terry McLaurin, big benefit of the rookie quarterback. Cortland Sutton, big benefit of the rookie quarterback. If we think Cam Ward is going to be any good, Calvin Ridley, big benefit of the rookie quarterback. So Calvin Ridley inside my top 20. Cortland Sutton right behind him, speaking of which. Next tier, DJ Moore, Garrett Wilson, Tedero McMillan, Xavier Worthy, Jameson Williams, Marvin Harrison, Ricky Pearsall, Jalen Waddle, Devontae Smith, George Pickens, Roma Dunze, Jerry Jeudy, and Chris Olave. If you noticed, a lot of 2s in there. A few 1s like DJ Moore. Kelly Williams is going to have a great season. We hope, I should say, under Ben Johnson, but I also, similar to before with Devontae Adams, I think there's a world where Odunze could have the better season. So let's just bring up Odunze now, and I'll run through when I get to his name. But I think that Odunze's rookie season is something that we can kind of toss aside for the most part. Some of it was his own fault in his play and consistency and concentration issues. But I think that his talent is still what we hoped it could be, and I like the fact he works better at the slot than DJ Moore. They both can work well in the slot. I just think Odunze does it a little bit better and will work there under Ben Johnson in kind of that Amon-Ra St. Brown hybrid-y role. I don't think he's going to have a true Amon-Ra St. Brown on the Bears, but that's why I say I think there's a world where Odunze outscores him. Garrett Wilson, he's going to need 200 targets to be a wide receiver 1. I don't know why everybody's so excited about him, despite the fact I love Garrett Wilson, and I think Justin Fields is interesting. It's just, it just takes a lot for him to get there. Similar to McMillan, I see some people arguing for the top 15. I think he could have more of a Marvin Harrison type season as a rookie, whereas it still comes down to Bryce Young. and being a better quarterback than he was last year, but the ADOT's not going to be huge. He's much more effective in the intermediate game. What if this offense is just slightly better and Bryce Young isn't throwing 30 touchdowns, Bryce Young isn't throwing 4,000 yards? The touchdown equity is part of the concern too. Look, I love McMillan, the talent. I just don't love him as much in the Panthers. Similar to Garrett Wilson. Put these guys on other teams, get super excited. Like number 24, Xavier Worthy, who I don't think is getting enough of a bump with the Rashee Rice situation. 4 games, he should be right around here. 8 game suspension for Rashee Rice, and Worthy should be even higher. Do we need to talk about Jameson? We do need to talk about Marvin Harrison. The problem with Marvin Harrison was part rapport, and I think that can get better. But the other part is the Cardinals using him so improperly. They send him on 4 verts half the time. Go route, go route, go route. If you play Madden, you get the 4 verts reference. If I could say that 5 times fast. 4 verts, I can't even say it twice. Ricky Pearsall deserves a bigger bump than people are giving him, especially with the Juwan Jennings situation. Maybe Juwan Jennings is just doing the hold-in and faking how severe the injury is because he's upset about the contract. But Pearsall finishing the season strong last year, similar to Worthy. There's a lot of talent here. Remember, the gunshot derailed his season for much of it. And I know people talk about the initial start for Pearsall and that there wasn't a lot of usage and a lot of effectiveness, but they also changed the usage for Pearsall as the season went on. And on top of that, when Brandon Ayuk comes back, that's the Jennings role, not Pearsall's role. Pearsall's role is safe. Waddle, Smith, number 2 is Pickens, number 2, Odunze I mentioned. Judy, I would have higher if I knew Flacco was the quarterback for the entire season, but at the same time, Flacco affects more of another wide receiver and, of course, David Njoku. So I think Judy kind of in this mid-low-end wide receiver 3 is a fair spot, especially you have to factor in the quarterback change at some point. Olave at 33 is going to be severely underranked if he stays healthy. 4 concussions in 2 years, a big concern. And I mean underranked even with terrible quarterback play. Go back to Calvin Ridley. He was a top 30 wide receiver with terrible quarterback play. Chris Godwin, I'm willing to take at 34 for the fact that I can stash him on my bench and probably the IR unless your league requires him to actually be on IR. But you can stash and wait for somebody that has top 20 upside when he's back, even with Ibuka, who I do like. Jacoby Myers, Zay Flowers, stop drafting Zay Flowers. Just stop with your Raven wide receivers. They're just not going to be touchdown guys, especially of Flowers' ilk. I will say there are some that can, like Rashad Bateman, but they don't get enough consistent usage. And we'll just talk about the fact Zay Flowers couldn't even be top 35 in points per game last year when Lamar Jackson threw for 41 touchdowns. Why do we think it's going to be better this season? Travis Hunter, 37. I think there's a really high ceiling, but this is also an offensive coordinator who doesn't love rookies. And, of course, the risk. Look, Hunter, a pure wide receiver, I would rank higher with the Odunzes and the Jameson Williams of the world. The risk that they use him some on defense and he only sees 70% of the routes on dropbacks or 70% of the snaps on dropbacks, it's just a risk that he's in this range. The names I mentioned in front of him are really the only reason he's down this far. Who he's one spot in front of, Matthew Golden, I have on a lot of teams, the clear number 1 for the Packers. All the rest of them are hurt right now. And finally, somebody that Jordan Love can rely on, at least hopefully consistently and also being out there 80+% of the time, unlike the most of the receivers that are 65%. Holy crap, we're already 8 minutes in about. Cooper Kupp, looking for a bounce back. If he's toast, you can move on. Drop him in week 3 and move on from him. But I'm taking the chance that he bounces back with the Seahawks, as I mentioned with Kubiak. Deebo Samuel, another bounce back situation. 200 targets to jabroni wide receivers last year from Jaden Daniels. And Deebo Samuel, I don't know if you said it, he wasn't looking fat. He was looking quite explosive during that preseason game. There's Ibuka, Jaden Higgins, my favorite undervalued wide receiver rookie, and I think that we saw the talk that guaranteed a second-round contract, which doesn't happen. They mentioned that he was the 2, and then all of a sudden that last preseason game was like, well, he might not be. I still have him in the 40s because, yeah, you might have to draft him and bench him for the first few weeks, but the upside, once he is clearly the 2 and not rotated in, I think is top 30. So I have Higgins in my 40s, 1 spot in front of Juwan Jennings, not knowing what's going on with him. Addison would rank higher if it wasn't for missing the first 3 games. If you want to take him a little bit higher and then make other plans, I'm okay with that. Shakir is a nice floor. Rashee Rice is all the way down here at 46. I get the fact of the games that he plays versus the games not. Like the games he plays, similar to the Godwin conversation. I'm just concerned that Rashee Rice is suspended weeks 6 through 11 or somewhere in there where they also have the bye involved and you're missing a good chunk of the season with other buys involved, and it's just going to hurt your team a lot. So that's why he's here. Clearly upside for more. Rashid Shaheed is there. There's some arguments that people believe he's the better wide receiver than Olave. I can see it. I still obviously lean Olave, and I think Shaheed is the big play option, which again goes back to the quarterback hurting him more than Olave, but that's one that I'm not going to go out on a limb and die on that hill. Michael Pittman drops down with the change to Daniel Jones, who I don't think will be the quarterback for the entire season, by the way. Josh Downs right there with him. I do think Josh Downs is helped by Daniel Jones. Stephon Diggs, like, what is left at this point? And he didn't sound super optimistic about being 100% in week one, but I just don't have a lot of Stefon Diggs, but I do have a lot of Josh Palmer, who could be the one for the Bills. I love Shakir for the floor, but you're talking about the upside. If Keon Coleman doesn't take a big step forward this year, Josh Palmer can be the one and potentially a top 25 wide receiver. Marvin Mims running as the 2 for the Broncos is appealing as somebody that I'm not the biggest fan of talent-wise, but if you're going to be the 2 and possibly in that Michael Thomas, Marquise Colston role, and he's not of their ilk, but in that role, being a number 2, this will actually, if he's the number 2 for the entire season, this is too low. Romeo Doubs, big play option, could be the 2 for the Packers. Cedric Tillman, there he is, had that run last season with 40 targets in 4 games. I don't think you'll see that this season, but if you're talking about their boomer bust picks, that's what some of these are. Like, this is why some of them will rank higher than other floor guys, which we'll get to in a minute, is don't waste your bench. Go for breakout options. If they don't work out in 3 weeks, move on, but take these shots at guys who have top 30, 35 upside. So Cedric Tillman, Jaden Reed hurt a lot, and I think he's fallen to number 3 on that depth chart. Demario Douglas, cool. Demario Douglas. Let's try that one more time. Demario Douglas. Why does that sound like Wario? Demario Douglas. That's a little bit better. Anyway, nice floor option, and he can be the number 1 for a good amount of time for the Patriots, but he needs 150 targets to be a wide receiver 3. Similar to Wan'Dale Robinson, who we haven't even gotten to yet. And actually, he probably needs 150 to be a wide receiver 4, just like last year. Keenan Allen at 57, Christian Kirk at 58. Fine. If they don't work out, those are guys that, again, will be one of the first ones I cut and move on from. Kirk has been productive when healthy. Keenan Allen, we're hoping that it was more of a Bears situation. But whatever it might be, they're fine bench options. Keon Coleman, like I said, that boomer bust bench option. Brandon Ayuk is way down at 60. The injury reports for him keep being cloudy, where unlike Godwin, where they say by October, I don't know what's going on with Ayuk. But again, he's somebody you can stash on your IR and kind of get that free draft pick. Luther Burden, similar to, oh, by the way, Odunze from last year, Jackson Smith-Njigba from the year before, he's 3rd. And yes, a lot of excitement and a lot of talent, but let's talk about him in 2026, or if somebody gets hurt. Darnell Mooney at 62, yes, he's way down there, according to what most people would believe, because when I hear Raheem Morris say, I hope we get to see him play this year, okay, that's. I'm worried we're going to get some really bad news soon. Yoshivas, obviously the upside if something were to happen to Higgins or Chase. Liggett, I don't even know if he's the 2 anymore. It might be Jalen Coker, who's just a few spots behind him. Trey Harris, I think that if Quentin Johnston doesn't improve, which is certainly kind of, I don't want to say a guarantee, but we're assuming that's the case at this point of his career. And then Keenan Allen falters. Trey Harris could step in as the 2. It's more the fact that Keenan Allen's signing slid down Trey Harris. There's a lot of S's in there. Rashad Bateman, cool. If you could predict his 5 good weeks, go ahead and draft him higher. I can't. I don't know that anybody can, unless I was going to even say Harbaugh, but I don't think he can even do that. Tyler Lockett might be at the end of his career. Roman Wilson, as of today, can be the 2 for the Steelers, and this is somebody that Mike Tomlin liked enough to draft in the 3rd round after he coached him up in the Senior Bowl practice. Josh Reynolds, the 2 for the Jets. As you can see, these are flyers with upside. Alec Alumanor, I put an L in his last name. Ayu Manor. Of course, the feather in his cap being the big game he had against Travis Hunter. And no, I don't obviously think he's a top 5 talent in this draft class, but somebody that, going back to Lockett, if Lockett is at the end and he steps up and is the number 2 and the big playability from Cam Ward, I think Ayu Manor could surprise a lot, including Dante Thornton for the Raiders, who could be the 2 alongside Jacoby Myers, but that makes him the 3. And then you get into deeper league options. Hopkins, Slayton, Alec Pierce, which is hurt by Daniel Jones. I'd rather see Anthony Richardson back at quarterback for him. Quentin Johnston, I mentioned. Tesla is one of my favorite deep sleepers. If something were to happen to Jameson Williams or Amon-Ra St. Brown, this team loved them. Traded multiple picks to go up and get Tesla in the draft. And somebody that I like a lot for 2026 if Jameson Williams doesn't come back. But at the same time, if injuries happen and he's all of a sudden the 2 for this team, the Lions, yeah, I would be really excited. He'll be one of the hottest pickups. Wan'Dale Robinson, Zay Jones has been the 2 for the Cardinals. Adonai Mitchell would be great, again, with Anthony Richardson and also a potential clearing out. I mean, he's now the 4th wide receiver, 3rd at best. There's just a lot of options. Oh, by the way, with Tyler Warren also involved at tight end, we'll love him more in a lot of other teams. Or, like I said, maybe one of those wide receivers gets moved out. Dontavian Wicks, Arian Smith, a lot of people thought the Jets overdrafted him, but just taking a flyer. Maybe they think they have something in him. Marquise Brown, Trey Tucker, Torrey Horton. I really like him as a stash as well. You know what? I should move him up. Ding, ding. I don't know what that why that happened that way. That tells me we need to move him up. I'm going to move him up. I'm going to move him up by like the Slayton range, because if something were to happen or Cooper Kupp is toast, I think Horton's big playability would pay off well in that offense. There's not much else down in this range unless you want to go for a Luke McCaffrey if he steps up as the 2 or 3 injury-wise, or maybe McLaurin doesn't sign a contract. Others like Jalen Noel for the Texans, Kanata Mumfield for the Rams. He is a Rams wide receiver if Puka Nacua missed time. And there you go. That's this year's Puka Nacua. We'll close out on that. I think I got in right around 15 minutes. The Madden Codes giveaway next week. Make sure you're subscribed. You know what? Even with the tweets, I'm still counting those as extra entries, so if you still want to tweet. But how about this instead? Because Twitter, hard for anybody to see the tweets nowadays anyway. I don't know what their algorithm is for who gets to see what. But anyway, how about just go get 2 or 3 of your friends or family members to subscribe? That would be better, actually, for me, just to help it out, to get that growth back. Even if they don't listen constantly, just to help get the podcast back to where it was. That's why I love you guys. Not as much as I love Barkley, as she's looking at me right here. The running back, too, but I'm talking about my dog. I should probably leave. Okay, goodbye.